So these are the kind of people we want on our schedule, huh? Right? Or at least for us to be able to put that out there. We love to be known for this type of energy if possible, right? Happy, good energy, calm. Absolutely. So you can tell, you can feel it. You're just sharing here in chat. Thank you, thank you. So these extreme emotions, they're a form of energy, right? It's what we're going to talk about in this session, right? So we're going to start with this first objective and we're going to define emotional energy. I'm keeping a close eye on this chat. You guys, appreciate you blowing it up. Anybody want to take a stab at defining emotional energy? So emotional energy, it's a force that's generated by our emotions, right? It can be felt as a physical sensation and it can influence our thoughts, our actions, our relationships, even our well-being, right? I'm reading some of these chat things. Thank you, thank you. Keep blowing it up and sharing. So it's a power, if you will, kind of sound powerful, right? It's a power behind feelings like happiness and joy, or on the flip side, anger and sadness, right? It can also drive change to a point of creativity or connection or stress and anxiety, right? So understanding um, how this emotional energy is channeled, it can lead to things like personal growth, right, on the positive end, or negative health outcomes. Yeah, we can make the call on these outcomes, right? We can have the choice, which is really a lot of what we're going to talk about, right? It's attitude. I changed it. That's cool. Okay, so with this shared, we have that opportunity. We're going to talk a little bit about it. We have to be aware, though, um, have a self-awareness of our own emotions. And do our own emotions help us, or do they hinder us? And if they're hindering us, we can learn to adjust that accordingly, you know. And I get it. That's easier said than done. But we've got people on the line that sound like you've kind of learned to do some of this. Clearly, there are different types of energy. And I'm gonna put a kind of a title, a name to this. Yeah, beyond positive energy, it's kind of like an anabolic energy, which is that positive, uplifting energy that builds us up. It can create enthusiasm within us, motivation, the type of growth, right? And then there's that other type of energy, negative energy, which I'll refer to as catabolic, right? And that's that negative energy that's low and it can be exhibited in a lot of different ways, like uh, apathy or fatigue, even anger and resentment. So that's that negative. So you can see the difference, just like those people that I got you to think about early on, or that energy, you know, when you're around somebody that just drains you, or you're around somebody that builds you up, those different types of things and what people bring to the table. So being able to recognize it, and it sounds like from chat, you were able to do this. So we're just going to kind of help put a little more clarity around that. That's what this session's all about. So both intense positive, which is that anabolic energy, and intense negative catabolic energy can drain you. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Positive energy can drain you? Yeah, you know, you've heard that too much of a good thing. You just can't stay up all the time, right? Jazzed all the time. So, yeah, we need to kind of find ways, outlets to kind of process through some of that. And yes, absolutely, that negative emotion or energy, if it's not effectively released or acknowledged, it can also lead to exhaustion, right? So learning to effectively release this energy can be crucial for our physical, emotional, and mental health, right? It can be helpful for us to recognize this type of energy and the intensity that we're bringing to the space, right? What we're bringing. A lot of times we'll use like a scale of like, oh, on a scale of 1 to 5, how you feeling today? Or maybe it's on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your energy like today? So being able to self-assess where we are or where our energy is at any point of the day, because we know our day can fluctuate depending on the situation and the environment or the circumstance that we're in the middle of, maybe a 5. Okay, we'll see if we can bring that up a little bit. Yeah, I've got a pre-built scale that I want to share with you that'll help you identify some different levels of energy that we may have and what we're bringing to the table, maybe what we'd recognize in others. Okay, so get ready because this is a pretty busy graphic. This self-perception chart it was actually designed by a guy named Bruce Snyder, and he is the founder and author of the Institute for Professional Excellence in Executive and Personal Coaching. Okay, so it's a tool, this perception chart is a tool that can help you recognize your own energy level at any point throughout the day because we know it can kind of bounce around, right? Uh, and it depends on, our environment, who we're around, what's going on. So what I like about this chart, you can see that there are 7 levels of energy. All right. And also on this chart, you can see where it's been identified that catabolic and anabolic energy that I mentioned, right? They're on this chart also. So you can also see this chart identifies core thoughts, feelings, and action, which is kind of cool too. So you can see that the inner rings of this circle tend to be that negative catabolic energy, right? And a person at this lower energy level, when you're in that catabolic, you tend to have thoughts of like a victim mentality, like life kind of happens to you. Oh, woe is me, everything's against me. Or maybe, you have thoughts of conflict or, they're kind of, what about like piling up on me or whatever. Just those are negative um, thoughts that kind of run through our mind when we're at these lower energy levels. Then the feelings that we tend to have when we're at these lower levels of 1 or 2, that catabolic energy, they tend to be, um, things that are more apathetic. Maybe we don't give a hoot. We don't have any energy. We don't care what people think. Those are our emotions and our feelings when our energy is that low. You know, for people at that level 1 energy, it's like life happens to them, right? It's like whatever. This is how it is. I always get this. Or maybe at best on this lower catabolic energy, we might have a little anger. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean by at best? Well, if you have a little anger, at least that signifies that you care a little bit, right? You care a little bit. So, regardless, both of these are some pretty catabolic types of feeling and energy. But to say that we don't ever have these or we don't ever want them isn't right either. We need to express some anger when we're feeling it, or, sometimes we feel conflict, so to acknowledge and work through that can be helpful. Now, the actions or results that we would have when we're in these types of lower catabolic energy levels are, you know, actions of like lethargic. You just don't care. You don't give a hoot, right? Or maybe we get a little defiance, and that defiance, can be seen as people being disagreeable, intentionally difficult, um, tough to get along with. So those are the kind of actions that we see from people when we're down in these lower energy levels. Let's move on a little bit and look at these um, little bit higher energy levels. All right. So you can see that these middle rings of this chart, is where we begin to move into some of that anabolic energy. It's where a person at these levels are going to have core thoughts of responsibility, concern, reconciliation. Maybe the feelings that people like this are having at these more anabolic energy levels are ones of forgiveness and compassion. How can we help? Some peace, love of the world, those types of positive feelings, right? And then our actions, they tend to be ones of cooperation and acceptance and ones of service. So if you're looking at this chart right now, you guys, can you see what the difference between that negative catabolic and that positive, more anabolic energy is? The lower ones are those lower catabolic energies are so self involved, or the world is just about them. And those other levels of energy, when you start to become into that positive anabolic realm, right, we become more engaged, right? More engaged in that positive anabolic energy. We are joining in on life. We're part of life. We want to contribute. We want to, you know, have reconciliation and acceptance and serve. That's a big difference between those catabolic and anabolic energy levels, right? So being able to recognize that in ourselves and others. And then when we move to those outer rings, these are a little different. These outer rings, like you can see, the outer rings, for example, tend to be all super, super positive. The thoughts, are synthesizing and a blend of kind of fusing and creative types of things. Now, these higher levels of energy, we don't live up there. We might occasionally fluctuate up into these areas, get little glimpses of it throughout our day, because this is kind of like a euphoric area, right? So those are the core thoughts that we might have in those upper levels. The feelings that we would experience are joy and absolute passion. We might jump up, we might get a bounce up there, but then, we come back down. Otherwise, if we're up there all the time, again, we'd be depleted, right? And then after those feelings, some of those actions that we see are creative and aligning with the wisdom of the universe, that kind of upper level. So yeah, it's just it's a little different, the non-judgment in our thoughts. Sometimes, you might think if you're in those upper energy levels, well, why did all these horrible things happen in our world? If there's such goodness out there. Well, people at these higher energy levels, they even will have thoughts of not judgment. Well, this is the path that individual needs to be on right now to learn what they need to learn. So it is a different type of energy. A lot of us resonate in those levels of 3, 4, and 5. But for us to be able to recognize it is pretty huge and can make a big difference. I just love to share that. I like this because it really puts a focus on our core thoughts, feelings, and actions, and it can make it easy for us to identify our own energy. Because remember, the lower our energy, the more negative or catabolic our energy is, and the higher our energy level is, the higher our anabolic energy is, right? So this is a lot to absorb, but hopefully this chart will help you and kind of help you get your thoughts around it. All right, so I'm going to transition here. I'm going to put somebody on the spot. Maxine, you're always so good at being on these calls. Can I ask you to unmute for a second?
How are
Would you
you?
would you read this quote for us?
Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another.
Thank you. Just give
You're
you guys a
welcome.
chance to listen to somebody else instead of me being the talking head. That's so
That's
true.
actually great. That is great.
Isn't it cool? It is a cool quote. And it's a great transition, though, because this Albert Einstein um, quote, it's the wisdom that supports the logic of this next objective. Our energy is consistent. It just changes forms, right? just like on that perception, it changes forms and it puts that energy in a contagious type of energetic movement, right? So there we go. That takes us right into how our emotional energy spreads, that contagion. Okay, that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here. How emotional energy works. All right, you ready? Seatbelts on. We do have, it starts with like a neutral force, if you will. It's like we all have this underlying energy, right? Or essence, if you will, which in the absence of emotional thoughts and feelings, it's neutral. But it's our thoughts that put an interpretation on things that give things a positive or negative kind of energy. So, like, we could meet somebody and really be neutral until we meet them, but then our interpretation kind of puts a positive or a negative spin on it, right? You know what I mean? You walk into a room, it's like, ooh, you can feel that energy, positive or negative. So that neutral force, once we add an interpretation to it, kind of turns it into feelings. And then those feelings kind of, it's a sensation, physical feeling that's within our body. So can you think of how do feelings feel in our body? Good or bad? We can feel both. So for example, maybe I'm not clear in what I was asking, but it's like when we're excited about things, we kind of maybe get a pulsing or a tingling, right? Those are physical sensations, feelings. I know that when I get a red flag with someone, I feel like you're having a panic attack. Right. Those are true feelings, right? Maybe we have a heavy feeling when we're experiencing loss, or we get a tightness in our chest, right? Maybe your stomach or head starts to hurt. So those feelings, once we've applied thought, a negative or positive, they become a feeling almost in our body, how we feel about that. And then our feelings become emotions. And it's actually our emotions that become that carrier wave. How this energy is transported, if you will, is through our emotions. Our emotions kind of transfer our feelings to that environment or to the other person. They're kind of fluid, like that Albert Einstein quote said, right? So we have to have a way to release. Hopefully, we're releasing these emotions effectively. So let's talk a little bit about this carrier wave, which is the subjective that we want to talk about, the mechanism of how it's transferred, because our emotion transfers in a couple of different ways. Verbally, which you're gonna get these once we start talking through them, and non-verbally. Let's start first with the verbal ones, because that's the easy one, right? So can you think of kinds of verbal cues that convey our energy? Tone, right? The pitch, right? How fast we speak, right? If we're way up here, the volume, the rhythm, these are all verbal, auditory ways that we can convey excitement, right? It can convey anger, it can convey warmth. These things can convey sarcasm, right? All of these on your screen, right? That one, what's that conveying? Excited, happy, right? Here's another one. What do you think that's conveying? What does that transfer? Right? It's a little anxious, fear, rage, right? Absolutely. Here's your last one. We'll end on a good one. I like that. You can't not smile when you hear that. So, absolutely, verbally, we can convey energy through things like pitch, tone, speed, even what we're saying, the words, right? So, yes, it can be contagious. This is a way that that energy transfers verbally. Now, nonverbal cues. So the thing about nonverbals, they can complement, contradict, even replace verbal communication, right? And offer almost like a deeper sense of somebody's energy and emotions if we're reading them right, right? So developing an awareness of our own and even others' nonverbal signals can significantly improve our interpretation. So let's take a look at some of them. You've got them on the screen, right? Certainly, facial expressions, right? So these facial expressions, they can convey interest or lack thereof, anger, happiness, confusion, disagreement, right? And then somebody else, I think, said something about eye contact. I saw tears. So yeah, our eyes can even convey like interest and attention, anger, dominance, even desire, right? So yeah, those kind of go with facial expressions. And then somebody said something about body language. And you always get people like, oh, you can't trust body language. I know, but if you look at your screen here, I mean, do you really think that gal on the left is super pumped about something? I mean, body language sometimes is undeniable, right? Confidence, anger. We can read some of these things. And then gestures, even hand gestures, time out, right? Some of it can convey a sense of communication, but it also can convey discontent or, positivity. Or anybody think of, yeah, there are some obscene gestures, right, that would maybe convey some catabolic energy. You know what some of those obscene gestures are. I'm not going to put them up on the screen, but we've all maybe felt like sharing one from time to time, or hopefully not been on the receiving end, but I have been. So yeah, body language can definitely do that. Here's one. A lot of times we don't see it as much in the workplace, but touch can be another form of energetic transference, right? It's called haptics, all right? And actions like a handshake or even a pat on the back, what are those kind of things conveying? What kind of energy? Pat on the back, handshake, fist bump, support, absolutely, right? Reassurance, maybe some affection, good natured. Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, say somebody's trying to convey some negative emotions through touch. What's that going to look like? Hitting, slap on the face. Hopefully, we don't see this stuff at work, but yeah, somebody shoving, punching. Yeah. So, this is a transference of haptic energy, right? Touch. Right. Thank you. Yeah. So, we all experience it. These are ways energy is transported through those feelings and emotions. All right. I love this one. This was empathetic uh, atonement. So sensing, this is our ability to sense feelings and intentionally match them, right? And it can actually sometimes be so habitual that it unintentionally happens. Maybe you guys have heard of the term mirroring, and this is a form of mirroring. It's where we subtly kind of reflect the other person's emotional state through our own verbal and even nonverbal cues, right? To connect empathetically and to let that person know that they feel heard and understood. This is what we're doing when we're trying to connect at this level. And when we do that, this is the cool thing that happens with that energy. It leads to that behavioral feedback loop, right? And this is when someone's energy actually can influence others, right? So what I get you to think about here, and then it comes back to us. Think about like anybody ever thumbs up or down or put it in chat? Anybody ever experienced a nasty cashier, right? Or maybe a disgruntled customer service person on the other end of the line, right? It's just like we kind of want to give it right back to them, don't we? Right. Hopefully not. But, on the flip side, you get Greeted with a kind gesture, hopefully that's returned. Or you greet somebody with a smile, hopefully you get a return with a smile. That's that behavioral feedback loop. And to use a well-known term, let me put this in chat. You get what you give, right? This is where we can determine, right? This is where we can determine. And I gotta tell you, um, I don't have this mastered. I had an experience this morning that kind of yanked my chain, and it's just easy if we can call ourselves on it quick enough, like it, Jessica, kill them with kindness. If we can call ourselves on it, then we can readjust, right? But I love this behavioral feedback loop. So these are ways that we can spread that emotion in motion. And then we need to take a look at if we're not, and if we are, how it can impact others for better or worse. And get what you give, right? So, according to the quantum workforce study that was conducted back in 2021, they found that 48% of employees experienced comfortable, satisfied, and even enthusiastic emotions at work. So, those are good. 48%. We'd like that to be better, wouldn't we, at work? Because it's important when our energy contributes to the positivity at work. It can boost mood and motivation, increasing our enthusiasm and our happiness, and at least a higher morale and greater productivity and creativity. It can strengthen our relationships for our team and even in our communities. Um, so absolutely, it's a cycle of reinforcement. It fosters kind of like a belonging and an empathetic mutual support with others on our teams, right? And it can improve team performance in those group settings. Um, for work, like if through positive emotions, transferring that energy that we just talked about, it leads to better performance, stronger sense of unity on your team. So these are all positive attributes to what we're bringing to the table in the workplace. Now we've got to look at that negative side because it can have some negative impact, right? Let me share what the findings are in this study from the American Psychological Association back in 2023. They found that 77% experience negative emotional stress at work. Probably not surprising at some point or another. Remember, we bounce around on that energy uh, perception chart, right? So when our energy is catabolic or negative, it can cause stress and anxiety. Negative emotions, trigger stress and anger and all those kind of gooky things that can create conflict, right? Low emotional energy or negativity can strain our relationships and lead to misunderstanding and conflict. It can lead to emotional exhaustion. Think about it. If you're always around that constant complainer or nothing's ever right, always got to add value to your work, right? It's never good enough. That can be pretty exhausting, right? And then also it can drain your vitality. It's like, what the heck are you talking about? Isn't that the same thing that we just said with the emotional exhaustion? This takes it a little step further. Have you ever heard of that? I kind of refer to them as emotional vampires, people that just kind of suck the energy right out of us, right? It just leaves you nothing. They manipulate situations, constantly negative. So, yeah, those are not great things we want to bring to the workplace. So, you can see why it's so important to be able to measure or put you know, um, a rating, if you will, on a chart as to what we're bringing to the table. What are we contributing to the workplace or to even the relationships in our life, right? You don't have to go all the way through this one to seven. Make it easy on yourself. Just go from 1 to 5. Give yourself a rating. Check it out. Am I apathetic or angry down here in this negative? Am I up here in, you know, happiness and joy and feeling good, right? Give it a rating and periodically ask yourself, what am I bringing? And if your energy shifted, what was it that shifted? But being able to identify that. And if it's something that you can move away from, let's do it. Move away from it if possible. So let's look at this last objective because now we've looked at how it can spread. We defined it, how it can spread, you know, the impact it can make on others. All right. Here's the key, you guys. Once you recognize your energy shifted, we can do some adjusting. We saw it earlier on the line from the Center from Threat Preparedness. You just choose. We can choose, right? Take some training because we, for our whole life, kind of tell ourselves that we can't do this. We have to shift our thoughts, right? We got to shift our thoughts so that it impacts us physiological with those feelings that are conveyed in those emotions. So if you can move away from the energy, move away from it, right? Just don't subject yourself to it. But if you can't, here are some self-regulation practices that you can use in the moment, right? The first one is a breathing anchor, and you'd expect me to share this one because a lot of times if we can bring ourselves out of those busy thoughts, oh, what did I do? How can I fix this? What, that kind of stuff, and bring it back to the here and now with our breath. That's a great way to get a handle on things. We can use a breathing anchor by just thinking about the cool air as we're inhaling, right? And then when we go to exhale, the warm air coming out, maybe our shoulders drop and relax, physically. What are we feeling like when we're breathing, but thinking about our breath and not that crisis or those horrible feelings that we're experiencing? So let's do one together, all right? So I like this popular one. It's box breathing. We're going to do one. So if you will, I want you to think about that cool air as you inhale. Maybe your lungs expand, your shoulders raise up a little bit. Pause. And as you exhale, feel that warm air coming out. And maybe your belly and lungs kind of lower down. And then hold that. And then you inhale again. So you're thinking about the breath, the process of the breath. And that breathing anchor can help us get out of that negativity of that catabolic energy. It's just a quick switch. All right. You guys have heard this, live in the world of social services. So reframing probably is not a new concept for you. It's a cognitive shift, but we get a lot of that negative self-talk. And so being able to recognize it, right? And catch ourselves when we start to do it and using this psychological technique with the cognitive behavioral therapy. It involves identifying it. You could use that self-perception chart if you're down here in those lower catabolic energy levels and replace those thoughts with something that's more realistic or constructive, preferably more positive. And you can do that by thinking these types of things. A more positive way that I can look at the situation, right? Um, Validate it. Are your thoughts founded in fact or fiction, right? Sometimes we think it's something and we're completely off base. So, are there any lessons that can be learned when something did go sideways? Any silver linings? So, these are ways that can reframe some of those things. All righty. So gratitude or positivity and memory anchoring. So, here's another one. Gratitude, as you might expect, is that overall feeling of thankfulness and things, events, experiences that we've had, you name it, right? So if we are experiencing gratitude, it's pretty hard to also at the same time be down and negative if we're grateful for something. So briefly recall a moment that you felt warmth, a connection, or something that you felt calm about, right? And that's something that you can feel gratitude over. To anchor in positive memories, right? You want to fully soak up those feelings of a positive experience, something that you remember going through. That memory anchoring is a way to recall that positive memory to change your thoughts from those negatives. The growl that somebody gave you as you passed them in the hall. Think about heading into a holiday weekend. Shift your thoughts to the last time we had Thanksgiving, whatever it is. Ground yourself in that positive memory, right? And this is more than just, looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, right? But yeah, there are things, lean on your successes, right? You can do these things through, especially if you're at those lower levels of energy, recall on past successes, journal about them, lean into your strengths, meditate on those, visualize yourself being successful in something, right? And then count your blessings, say thanks. Absolutely. Carve out some time. Expect a good outcome. Thanksgiving dinner or those types of things. This is the last one, you guys. We're as far as an approach. So, grounding and a body scan. I'm going to take you through this. You can if you want to quickly try to join it. But a body scan is a mindfulness method also that involves bringing awareness to different parts of our body. So, you foster a connection with our physicality in the present moment so that you can kind of release some tension. So say we have a tight neck or the shoulders or jaws are locked up and being tensed up. I'd like to kind of close your eyes or lower your gaze. Think about your breath, right? Cool air in, warm air out. Maybe your shoulders drop. Think of like if warm wax were just melting down from the top of her head all the way down, our tight neck, jaw, shoulders relaxing and just melting away all that stress, right? So that's kind of like a grounding type of body scan from head to toe. Right? Other grounding activities might involve getting in touch with your senses, thinking about right now, what do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell? And it takes your mind out of that cyclic loop of like critical crisis thinking, right? Put yourself in the present using those senses. So those are some grounding things that you can do. So in wrapping up, these pointers and reminders that you can take from this. But before you enter a conversation or situation or a holiday event, check your energy. Take pause if you need to. Take a breath. We just went through that box breathing. And then afterwards think, did my emotions help or did they hinder? What can I do next time? Because small changes and shifts in our energy are going to happen over time. They don't happen immediately because we've trained ourselves to be the way we are. We have to gradually embrace these practices to move our energy in the way that we want it to be and how we want to be thought about and remembered.